Growing anger at the abuse of the public broadcaster by its head, Hlaudi Motsoeneng, has brought people onto the streets again. A march to Constitution Hill was the answer to the recent illegal suspension of journalists and improper censorship in banning coverage of civil unrest and protest. While the disciplinary hearing of suspended journalists began, protesters gathered outside the SABC building in Auckland Park. Numerous civic organizations were represented, along with prominent journalists.
We need to say there must be an end to censorship in the SABC. How else are we supposed to be able to make informed decisions about who and how we vote for in this local government elections when Tshwane is burning, the SABC is not covering that, or when the president has been misbehaving and being delinquent in his behavior, there is no coverage of that on the basis of unlawfully revised editorial policies.
We need this South African Broadcasting Corporation to give people that oxygen that they need for a democracy to function. The oxygen a democracy needs is access to information, it's access to the truth. Public broadcasters help us to expose corruption, they help us to teach people about their rights.
If the SABC is compromised, it means the quality of our democracy is compromised. I also worked here. I worked here for 9 years. I helped transform this organization from a National Party mouthpiece into a public broadcaster.
There has been a deliberate campaign to capture the SABC, which is really the voice and the mirror of the nation.
When I left in 2004 and went to the Business Day and began analyzing the political situation, I was also put on a list of people that were banned from speaking on the SABC.
I'm here because I'm scared that this public broadcaster is no longer acting in the public interest. In fact, it's acting against the public interest because it has been captured by a particular clique. So I'm here to protest, I'm here to tell other people to protest, and I'm here to show solidarity.
We fought that banning through the commission, the Sisulu Commission. A court actually underlined the findings that there was political interference. So the genesis of what you see today is there. And so I'm here in solidarity with my colleagues for them to do their jobs.
When political elites capture the SABC, then they can also capture and control 7 million of the 12 million TV-owning households in this country, and probably the vast majority of the 15 million households in this country in terms of what they are led to believe is happening in the country.
And more importantly, for the court's decision to be upheld that Hlaudi's appointment is irregular. He should not be in this premises.
This is happening through Mr. Motsoeneng, who is receiving direct instructions from a lame duck board that is entirely ANC aligned, as well as a Minister of Communications who is unlawfully and routinely interfering in the affairs of the National Public Broadcaster instead of ensuring that it complies with the letter and spirit of the Broadcasting Act as interpreted through the lens of the Constitution.
So now the process is in motion to try and get rid of them. So our struggle to have them reinstated must be intensified. They are now officially proceeding with the disciplinary hearings inside of all the SABC staff.
Reinstate them! Reinstate them! Reinstate them!
We did not fight and put all of the sacrifices that we did so that we can allow a new elite, no matter the color that elite will bear, whether it is black or white. These freedoms enshrined in this constitution are important to us all as South Africans.
When the suspended journalists emerged from the hearing, one of them, Thandeka Qubule, addressed the crowd.
What is happening to journalists in the SABC is a microcosm of what is happening generally in our country. Yes. We must not allow the public space to close. So thank you for coming to stop the sun setting on us. Don't let the sun go down on us. But we wonder how South Africans can make informed decisions, as our mandate requires us to do, without knowing what is happening in our country generally. Some of us were here in 92 and 94 when one of the conditions for the transition to democracy was a free and independent and balanced broadcaster.
We have petitioned the Portfolio Committee on Communications through successive parliaments, on successive years, to actually undertake a due inquiry and a public inquiry at that, for that matter, about uncovering what is the root cause of the instability and cancer that has been eating the SABC from the inside out, and the corrosive environment that Jimmy Matthews described in his resignation letter on Monday. Parliament has been derelict in its duty and in fact delinquent and failing us as the nation and as our public representatives on this matter.
The protesters arrived at the steps of the Constitutional Court and were met by the court manager. The suspended journalists, Suna Venter, Tandega Qubule and Futa Kricher, made representations to the court officials.
Sir, we've come to pray upon the court, to hear our pleas. Our freedom of expression rights in 16(1)(a) have been continuously violated by the public broadcaster. We are here to pray that the courts perhaps would consider seeing us directly or hearing our matter directly. We've come with our colleagues, some of them suspended, some of them warned, some of them vilified and victimized, to pray on the courts. As a court, well, it's our last resort, sir. We don't know what else to do.
Okay. You're most welcome. As the acting court manager, I will accept your memorandum, and I'll make sure that it will be handed over to the judges and the Chief Justice, of course.
Thank you, sir.
A few days after the march on Constitution Hill, some organizations concerned with the situation met to discuss coordinating their efforts.
To lift my suspension. And I will also not go back to work, even if the suspension is lifted, if this editorial policy has not been challenged constitutionally. Because in effect, he's going to send us back to work to go and enforce an editorial policy that we are of the view is unconstitutional, and then this sort of thing can just happen again and again.
Where is that editorial policy? Have you published it somewhere?
Yes, it's actually, I didn't bring it.
It's published on our website. The ICASA Act also then has a code of conduct on to which all the licensees need to comply with. The Code of Conduct also speaks directly to the development and revision of the editorial policies in line with the relevant governing acts, etc. and so forth. There was no draft that was published, which means that these policies are manifestly unlawful, and the SABC has also lied to the public. So has the Minister of Communications in saying that a public consultation process in line with the Broadcasting Act has been conducted. We have that on record.
During the strategy session, Hlaudi Motswening phoned to cancel the arranged meeting.
Hello, Chief.
Hi, Chief. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Fine.
Yep. Because you're saying that you won't change the decision.
Yeah, we have already engaged the chief. The chief knew as they proceed with the matter. So I'm saying there's no need for us to meet.
Okay, but we are going to come as per the agreement that we reached with you. So you better log us out then.
No, you're not going to meet me. Let me just put it here. Okay.
We are coming though, because I think that what you are doing now is unfair. You are breaking an agreement with you. We had in full belief in your integrity. There's an agreement to meet with you at 12. You suggested that time, not us.
No, you can't see me, but it's fine. Okay? All right, sure.
We are coming.
Yeah. There we are.
I thought as much. Exactly.
So we knew, exactly.
What will he say? That's the point.
Good day. The office of the acting CEO, please. Thank you.
Office of the CEO.
Good day. Can you just hold on a call from Mr. Zweli Mavavi, please? Zweli!
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, how are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm okay, Zweli Mavavi.
Yes, sir.
We outside, we had come here to see Hlaudi, and as per the agreement we have with him on Friday, he just cancelled on us on the last minute. We want to see now the acting CEO so that we can take the issue to him rather. Can we meet the CEO, please?
Unfortunately,
We are outside.
the CEO is not in the building. He's not in today. He's only back in the office tomorrow.
I think we should convene a proper press conference and give the media a fair notice.
Yeah. Look, this was actually a situation of either we were going to jump or they were going to push. It had been coming. And at the same time, the grip that the SABC has on its employees is so complex because it's so complicated by loyalty and then fear and then, commitment to your job, but uncertainty and all of these things, because remains a fantastic institution. If you look at what it's supposed to be, the voice of the voiceless, it remains a fantastic institution. We are just going through a hell of a bad patch.
We must insist that this is about this is about free and fair elections. There can be no free and fair elections until we free the airways.
Yes, absolutely.
And so that must be that's the issue that we are raising in the press statement.
Well, obviously the rot at the SABC can be traced back a long way. People like Snooki Sikelala were very instrumental in politicizing the SABC, as was Jimmy Matthews, who's recently jumped ship. This all predates Hlaudi Motsoeneng. It's just that under his watch, politicization has reached new heights. He's been particularly heavy-handed, particularly brazen in his approach, in the way that he interferes in the editorial content of the SABC.
When people talk about censorship, I don't know what is SABC censoring. Myself and Kaiser, we explained several times to say certain visuals, we are not going to show them. And actually, if you talk about censorship, because you know English better, I think, because you are clever people. If you talk about censorship, I think all newsroom, they censor stories every day.
At the SABC, for example, when a ruling comes down from above saying you should not show certain kinds of pictures, such as pictures of people destroying property. That is censorship because it's a decision not based on editorial values. It's being imposed on editorial people for political reasons, to project a certain political image in, I think, a false sense of what is patriotic.
Not that we condone the destruction of property, we have condemned that, and we think it has no space under a democratic dispensation. But for the SABC equally to take the harshest draconian measures they could ever think of that are completely outside the scope of democratic dispensation was quite shocking to us. And we felt that that was actually a further demonstration of the inability of the SABC management to lead that institution.
The Broadcasting Act of '99 requires that the national public broadcaster transparently and purposively consults the public on its editorial policies and guidelines. This has not been done, and as a result, Mr. Motsoeneng has designated himself editor-in-chief, unlawfully calling himself the alpha and the omega of the SABC, quote unquote.
Individuals have risen up in the SABC to become almost untouchables, to operate outside the policy space, to dismiss journalists, to intimidate them. If they can't kowtow their views, they are dismissed willy-nilly without following the law. This is just some of the pathetic developments that are taking place at the SABC, and we feel that the board of the SABC should relinquish its task because it has failed in its job to oversee the management of the SABC. In fact, most members of the board have actually become the servants of management.
The SABC is obligated to report on the news as they happen without fear or favour, and without interference by political, commercial or sectarian interests.
And we're not going to play in that space of people who are calling whatever from outside, and they are not going to dictate for this organization. We are here to lead. The reason why we are here is to lead, and we are leading. We are not apologetic about what we are doing in this organization.
I think what's interesting about what Mr. Motsoeneng says is he doesn't talk about the public interest. He doesn't talk about serving the need for what the public needs to know, or for truth, or for veracity. He's talking about making decisions for political purposes. He's talking about making decisions for political ends. He keeps talking about people wanting to impose their views on the SABC. But what's striking about that is that the SABC is a public broadcaster. So it should be responsive, flexible to public pressure and public demand, rather than to narrow political demands and interests. And it seems to me it's the latter that he's catering to rather than the broader public interest.
The SABC's current bias and illegal editorial code violates its statutory obligations and the very constitutional principles of freedom of information and expression on which our constitutional democracy hangs. Unless the situation changes immediately, the SABC's reportage poses a threat to free and fair elections.
Jackson Mthembu, the ANC Media Committee chair, called a press conference the very next day. As the media waited, they were probably not expecting Mthembu's strong reaction toward the recent developments at the SABC.
The African National Congress has noted with grave concern recent developments at the South African Broadcasting Corporation, SABC, which have led to the resignation of the acting group chief executive officer, the suspension of several senior journalists, and widespread condemnation of policy decisions at the public broadcaster, which borders on censorship.
There have been a number of instruments and strategies that have been used by SABC top management, the SABC board, as well as the Ministry of Communications, to subvert the independence and credibility of the SABC. The first of these has been how the Minister of Communications has amended the SABC's Memorandum of Incorporation to give her direct control in terms of appointing the top brass of the SABC.
So when Mr. Motsoeneng was then appointed, moved from acting to formally appointed, they challenged that in a court of law, and of course, given the public protector's findings, it wasn't very difficult to see which way that was going to go, and he lost. And then he appealed that to the High Court, and surprise, surprise, he lost. So he appealed that to the Supreme Court, and surprise, surprise, he lost. And so now you have the case where all of these courts have done it, and it seems that this is more a tactic by the SABC and senior management to use the court and judicial process to delay and keep him in his position for as long as they possibly can.
Maybe I must just say, from the ANC Communication Subcommittee and from the ANC leadership and membership, we have never asked anybody in the SABC to speak for the ANC. Nobody.
The SABC revised its editorial policies without complying with the letter and spirit of the Broadcasting Act, which requires that the SABC publish a draft set of editorial policies for the public to engage with and decide on whether they are appropriate or not for where we are at politically, socially and economically.
It didn't begin with this current government. It began some time back. And slowly over time we've seen evidence of political factions trying to capture the SABC, trying to influence it in very irregular and unlawful ways.
The SABC board, which is directed by the Broadcasting Act to do this, in fact passed these editorial policies under cover of darkness in concert with the Minister of Communications. So already there is an inappropriate alignment to the SABC board, who are supposed to be public representatives and accountable to the people of this country, are now working in concert with the executive level of government, which is not supposed to have a direct role in the affairs of the SABC, to the exclusion of the people of this country.
We fought for a public broadcaster with a public mandate that is well articulated. There is no way that the ANC can then infringe on the public mandate that we fought so hard for the SABC. There is no way.
Commentators have noted differences between Mthembu and the Minister of Communications. It is suggested that Faith Mutambi is protected and supported by President Zuma. She has reportedly refused to answer questions put by the ANC relating to digital migration processes, stating that she is not answerable to them.
So when you've got the ANC calling her to the Minister Mutambi to Luthuli House and she declines to go, there's only one person in the country who can give her that kind of instruction.
I am speaking as the head of the ANC policy committee. And that policy committee is called the ANC Communications Subcommittee of the NEC. Now, if indeed there's been some crossing of the lines amongst and between ourselves, well, let's apologize for that. But this is the ANC statement. This is the ANC statement.
But the minister takes it a step further and introduces a Broadcasting Act that removes Parliament's role altogether in terms of the appointment of the SABC board, and puts that function in the Minister of Communications' hands, where she's the one who appoints the body that will appoint the SABC board, and she has the power to fire that appointing body if it does not comply with what her political agenda is. Now, all of these things looked at together really paint a really devastating picture for the future of the independence and credibility of the SABC. And that is why we as the people of this country actually have to stand up and fight back against this by ensuring that our political representatives in Parliament are actually holding the SABC and the Minister of Communications to account around how they are trying to subvert the independence of the SABC.
We can't allow our constitution to be messed up. We can't allow our constitution to be contravened. We can't allow ANC policy to be contravened. And that's why we are meeting with the minister on Monday.
The outcome of this battle of the airwaves is of crucial importance to South Africa. It is a dramatic test of the resilience of the country's democratic processes. Like the campaign to get state-funded AIDS medication, civil society is leading the efforts to fight for an effective state broadcaster that will serve the people of this country. This process extends beyond news reporting and includes the effective management and use of funding, the appointment of staff, and all aspects of running this very important organization.
We have told the ANC that with elections around the corner, we cannot afford to have a public broadcaster that is compromised, that instills censorship, a public broadcaster that speaks on behalf of a faction of the ruling party. So we have said that the ANC, if it is serious about making sure that the SABC is a public broadcaster that can account to the public, that can deliver news and current affairs programming that is impartial, accurate, fair and balanced, then decisive measures have to be taken, and very quickly, because as the public, what we're seeing is consistent political interference in the public broadcaster.
Most importantly, we are needing to depoliticize our SABC and make it a space for plurality of political thought, plurality of ideologies, plurality of voices, as well as a diversity of those voices, ideology, as well as political ideas, so that all of these ideas and positionings can debate and can really have it out to enrich all of us as a society through conversation, so that we as individuals and political agents can make the right choices for ourselves and our society.